Welcome to Nittany Nation Overtime.
All right, welcome to Nittany Nation Overtime. I'm Jack Wascher, filling in for Peter Terpstra, and as always, I'm joined by the NitWits, Mark Brennan, Neil Riddell, and former Penn State defensive end and all Big Ten first team, Justin Kirpakis. Thank you so much for joining us.
But thanks for having me.
We've been working on Justin for a couple of years. So
we finally got him. So
glad to be here.
Yeah. All right. Penn State wraps up non-conference play, convincingly beating Kent State 63-10. I ask you, Neil Riddell, did you see enough from Penn State in non-conference to feel confident going into conference play?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they've clearly made a lot of improvement from the first game. When you look at the last 8 quarters, especially defensively, they've really only allowed 2 scores. Yesterday made 1 big play. So, yeah, I mean, clearly they still have a lot of things that I think that they need to iron out, and against better competition, it would be more problematic than they were yesterday, but I think they are trending in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, if they were going to have a tight game, in terms of what you're talking about, Jack, going into the conference, the best time to have that would be at the start of non-conference play, especially with this Friday night game coming up next week. This way, you know, they were able to blow out a team, play a bunch of young players in the fourth quarter, get your starters out of there. They're losing a day of practice this week, and Justin, I'm sure you could speak to that. You take that week of practice out, now all of a sudden that extra quarter these guys got to take a little bit of a rest, and then the young guys got to play. That's a big deal going into conference play, isn't it? Absolutely.
And what they had the ability to do is getting those young guys in, and even the guys that have been around. I mean, the most improvement you'll ever see on a football team is from the first to second game. And I'd say that we saw a pretty big jump. And then the third game continue on. You had the guys take a break in the fourth quarter, young guys get reps. There was some apprehension, it felt like, in the first couple games. I think that's probably been weeded out, and then be able to go into Friday fresh and ready.
Well, I think is that a part that's not talked about this team enough is the return game with KJ Hamler, DeAndre Tompkins. We saw that in the Pitt game, and then yesterday, even though there wasn't a return for a touchdown, Penn State had a lot of short fields, and I think that's going to be a very dangerous weapon for them come Big Ten play.
Yeah, well, you're seeing the kind of speed that they've recruited over the past few years. Obviously, Tompkins was part of James Franklin's first recruiting class here, but to get some of these other kids, I mean, KJ Hamler is just electric. And, you know, I actually said last week that there are times that Hamler reminds you of Saquon Barkley. And the reason I say that is not because he's a big bruising runner, but Saquon Barkley was super fast, but he was functionally fast on a football field. When you see some of the stuff that Hamler is able to do, making people miss and then getting back up to full speed, again, I'm not saying he's the next Saquon Barkley, but look at some of these moves and what he does just to make people miss, unbelievable. And that's paying off from the speed that they've had. Listen, a few years ago they had Koa Farmer returning kicks. You had Nick Scott returning kicks. Now all of a sudden you have these, you know, especially a guy like Hamler, just unbelievable what he's able to do.
Koa Farmer's in the midst of his 7th season. The thing I liked yesterday was DeAndre Hopkins, because he's a kid that's struggled. Hopkins, yeah.
It's more about his fantasy team right now.
We were talking about Bill O'Brien earlier, but Tompkins had struggled the first couple games a little bit, and he found his stride yesterday. 100 yards in receptions, beautiful touchdown pass in the end zone, key part of the return game. And I think they're going to need him. I think he has a good track record with them, and to have a veteran senior leader, particularly while they work this out with Juwan Johnson, to see when he is going to really start to fit into the offense.
You know, Trace McSorley continues to impress. He may not have the gaudy numbers, but Justin, you know, watching him over the last couple of years, what sticks out about Trace to you?
He's a competitor. Okay, so he doesn't have the testables, the 6'5", that everyone looks to, but the guy just knows how to win and compete. And so any of those things that maybe the height that he doesn't have, he sure more than makes up for in the way that he leads the team. You know, his work ethic sets the tone, and then the guy's just a competitor.
Yeah, you know what I loved about him yesterday, or on Saturday, depending on when people watch this? He throws an interception.
Yes.
And 90% of the quarterbacks are not going to track that guy down. And that's not a knock on most quarterbacks, but you know, there has to be an element of you're angry and all these things, even though the pick wasn't necessarily his fault. Yeah, and you don't want to get hurt. He goes and makes a textbook tackle on that guy, and that was a safety. It's, you know, this was, I mean, the way that he angled in and dropped that guy, and listen, Penn State's defense ends up holding. Kent State gets a field goal. The score's 21-10. That's a big difference from being 21-10 to 21-14. And this is over a player who knows how that game may unfold. I think Penn State's still going to win it, but who knows how it's going to unfold.
Right. Well, they are going to win it. But you know, when you're sorting through a 53-point win, it's hard to pick out a play of the game. But that would have been it, or one of them.
And what message does that send? And that's another one you could address, Justin. When you're a young player on that team and you see the Heisman candidate do that.
He's a football player, okay? So anytime I played, effort plays like that, whether it was on special teams or guys that were stars tracking down a guy like that, just kind of the never say quit, because that does, as long as they don't get in the end zone, you have a chance to stop them. And he gave them a chance for that, and I think that the young guy said, boy, if Trace is hustling like that, then I sure better be.
Yeah. Well, a lot of good from yesterday, but coming up next, how can we find bad in a 53-point victory? Well, James Franklin was able to do that, and we spotted a couple things too. We'll tell you what that is next.